Well, wildfires burning throughout the state, it's a topic Oregon Senior Senator Ron Wyden knows all too well, being quoted multiple times saying, today's fathers are not your grandfathers. Today's fires are not your grandfather's fires. Thanks so much for joining us in studio.
They are bigger, they're hotter, they're leaping over rivers, and we're just going to have to take some stronger approaches. For example, I think we're going to have to pay firefighters a competitive wage. And I can tell you, I have town hall meetings all across the state. I had almost 1,100. I always see these help wanted signs, and they're paying more than they pay the firefighters. So there are a lot of pieces of the puzzle, and of course, the heat on the ground so often makes the community hotter and drier, and part of it's climate change.
Absolutely. And earlier this week, you actually met with fire officials throughout the state. They kind of discussed the 2024 outlook. What was your takeaway from that?
They basically said that Mother Nature has been pretty helpful to us over the last few months. There's been a bit more rainfall, a bit more snowpack, but Father Time is, catching up with us. There's so much hot and dry material on the forest floor. They particularly warned about the prospect of lightning strikes this year and thought that southeastern Oregon would be a real serious challenge for us.
Did they seem prepared for the year?
Yes, but what I'm worried about is now if Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, all the West has these fires, it's going to be hard to get enough personnel and equipment.
Absolutely. All right, well, now let's switch to a big topic of discussion today, the presidential debate that happened last night. Do you support Joe Biden as the nominee on the ballot in November?
Let me tell you what my thoughts are after the debate, and we're still not a full day into the discussion. I heard Donald Trump talking about firing people. Well, the fact of the matter is the American people fired Donald Trump for a cause in 2020. And after all that lying last night, I don't believe Oregonians are going to want to rehire him for 2024.
There's been a lot of discussion specifically from members of the Democratic Party in shock of how President Biden handled himself last night. What was your reaction to that?
The president said today that was one evening. I can tell you, as chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, the tax writing committee, I worked very closely with both the president and the White House team to make sure that we were changing the law so that we could take on the pharmaceutical companies that were price gouging seniors. We wrote the climate change package, biggest investment in fighting climate change in American history through a change in tax law and a corporate minimum tax. I can tell you the White House and the president were fully engaged working with us. That was a historic package.
Absolutely. Now this week, the U.S. Supreme Court, of course, making a lot of rulings directly impacting Oregonians. What are your takeaways on some of those rulings?
Well, there have been a host of them. I'm particularly, concerned about the rolling back of women's health care. I had the first hearings on alternatives to surgical abortion, and the reality is that this is an area government ought to stay out of. This is something that ought to be between a woman and her physician.
Absolutely. We actually ran a story earlier this week, Planned Parenthood in Oregon seeing a major increase and a need in abortion care, doubling the amount of abortion cases coming into clinics, a lot of them coming from patients out of Idaho. So from what would you say Congress is doing to address the abortion access?
Well, here's what's driving that. Under the Dobbs decision, women are having their personal data weaponized. So a car today is basically a computer on wheels. And as these cars are going from state to state with women, and I'm looking for places where they can make their own private decisions, attorneys general, for example, that don't agree with this being a private decision for a woman, they can set up all kinds of sanctions and prosecutions and the like. I'm taking that on, and particularly trying to protect the rights of women in those situations.
And as you have traveled throughout the state to meet with the different communities, have you seen specific topics? We know we hear a lot locally, homelessness, affordable housing, big concern.
What I can tell you, yes, housing is a crunch everywhere, and Democrats aren't supposed to be supply-siders. I'm a supply-sider on housing. We need to create more of it. But what I'll tell you is the dominant issue at my town hall meetings is the issue where the second word is bill. It might be medical bill, it might be housing bill, it might be gas bill, it might be education bill, but a lot of Oregonians are walking on an economic tightrope, balancing the food bill against the fuel bill, and that's why I feel so strongly about my bill to hold down the cost of prescription medicine. We're finally taking on pharma, and it's long overdue because people are getting hammered with those costs.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing everything from Congress. We really appreciate your
We'll do
time.
it again.
All right,
Thanks.
sounds good.